Humor me a moment and imagine yourself as a child again. You hear your father angrily drinking while your mother worrily tucks you in at night. Then suddenly, you're moving to a new place, a new house, bigger, better, and more fancy. Everything was going well until your parents suddenly started acting weird, staring at lights and not responding. When you open doors, there are men staring back at you, and the only response you get is their heavy breathing. You explore the house and see that it keeps changing and changing. You get lost, and when you find your parents, they've changed. The house starts burning, and you have no choice but to escape. That was the opening story of the 2022 stop-motion anthology called The House, co-produced with Netflix. I'd love to call it a horror, but it's more than that. It's telling a lot more than just a scary house. This film includes 3 stories set in the same house but in different time periods and with different characters. The House was written by Edna Walsh, and each story was directed by 3 different directors, each having a very different take on the story they handle. Before I give you a rundown on the 3 stories and my analysis, I'd like to urge you guys to watch it for yourself. It isn't an exciting or horrific experience, but it is art. It makes you analyze things and think about it, having your own interpretation of the extremely weird and unsettling things that happen in this film. And I want you guys to experience it yourself. But with that being said, hey guys, what is up? It is me, Rosmo, and let's talk about The House. The first segment is titled And Heard Within a Lie is Spun, directed by Emma. This is her full name. It features a family of 4, a mother named Penny, her husband Raymond. They have 2 daughters, an 8-year-old girl named Mabel, who is voiced by Mia Goth, and if you're watching TikTok, you probably recognize her for that one clip from Pearl where the credits roll and she's just smiling there unblinkingly, and a baby sister named Isabel. They get visited by some relatives of Raymond that seemed wealthy and disgusted at Raymond's living conditions, constantly looking down at the family and disappointed that their newborn isn't a boy. They insult Raymond for not being able to rise up from his lesser circumstances compared to them. Can I just say, this is a really nice house too. I don't care about these bean-headed, rich, wrinkly-ass people. I like this house. They looked down on Raymond and insulted him and his father, and Raymond did not take it lightly because... You mean rightly so, that's just rude as hell. Raymond goes out, meets this creepy looking man in a palanquin, which is usually carried by people to travel, but it's just out there, out of nowhere. Raymond goes back to the house very creepily, eats a bunch and then drinks again and then falls asleep. The man in the woods was actually an architect that offered them a new house for free, only if they leave their current house and move to the new one he makes for them. They agree, and when they arrived, Raymond is fascinated by the fireplace and Penny with the sewing machine. They also have dinner provided for them for heaven knows how long, which is too good to be true if I'm being honest. But as I said in the intro, Mabel notices the workers just staring and breathing heavily. To make it worse, her view of her old house from the window, which she enjoys, disappears within the next day, and the workers started working on a new room, and she wakes up to him staring at her through the window, doing nothing and just standing there. Menacingly! She leaves, and then she saw Mr. Thomas panicking, and then he goes back to normal. Huh, that's weird. Anyway, stairs are gone, so she has to go down through the billiard room, through these creepy stairs and a hole on the floor. Oh, and well, bye. She tells her mom, who doesn't care at the very least and barely notices them, just like the night before where they just stare at a light in a dining room. Suffice it to say, her parents are acting very weird the more they live in the house. She sees that her dad is laughing at the destruction of their old home, and Mabel didn't like that Mr. von Schoenbeek, the architect I mentioned earlier, gave them fancy clothes as gifts. Mabel said they looked like a bunch of dumbasses and was forced to apologize because her parents think that it was so modern and fancy. She leaves saying how much she hates the house, and Isabel runs off to the basement where they find a layout of their old house, and that's where they sleep for the night peacefully. Once they got out, they were lost and they couldn't find a staircase, and while looking, they heard crying. It was actually Mr. Thomas, the guy who is Mr. von Schoenbeek's employee and the person guiding and assisting them. But why is he crying, you may ask? It's because he's actually just an actor. Schoenbeek gives him a script to tell the family, and now he's fed up because he keeps changing the layout and he's stuck there as well. We also get the shot of the house and Mr. von Schoenbeek, which is weird. Raymond burns all of their belongings to fuel the fireplace along with Mabel's beloved doll's house, and the house is burning. Great job, Raymond! Mabel finds her parents turned into furniture and they tell them to escape. Raymond is the chair and Penny is the curtains, by the way, and she helps them escape, and the children do. Just 2 young girls alone in the icy cold. And that ends the first story. Now, as much as I'd love to discuss this movie's theme as a whole, we have 2 more stories to discuss, so I'll save my analysis and theories for later. There are timestamps you can skip to in the description. Then we we move on to segment 2, titled Then Lost is Truth That Can't Be Won, directed by Nikki Lindroth von Bar. Now, sweeties, this segment does have a lot of bugs, so if you feel uncomfortable by it, you can click away or skip to the next segment. Though I can't guarantee a bug-free experience in the analysis part of the video, you have been warned. Segment 2 features a rat developing a house on his own because of redevelopment and budgetary pressures, as he states, and he also seems like he has a lot of debt to pay from all the unpaid invoices behind him. Plus, he seems to not get along with his lover, hinting by the conversation he has on the phone, where they appear to dislike being called darling, so he calls them sweetheart, and they hang up. He struggles to fix the house himself, adding to the fact that there's an infestation problem so close to the viewing of the house. He covers it up sloppily and dealt with it himself, but was not able to solve it with all the bugs still crawling around. And he even sleeps around the dead bugs. Ugh. The day of the viewing comes and everything looks great, except he got the wrong groceries. He was planning to make really fancy food. Instead, he got sausages, instant noodles, and such. The potential buyers arrive, make a whole damn mess of the place, especially this kid with the ice cream that I'd love to smack on the freaking floor, you little annoying lip. He tries to persuade the buyers with the fancy kitchen, telling so many details about the creation of the kitchen, the countertop, and the lights, but to no avail, dropping his phone and just flashing the lights in such an annoying way. Luckily, two creepy rats that pop up out of nowhere seem to be interested in the house and ask some very specific questions. They keep looking around and even sleep for the night. And since our protagonist is desperate for the house to be sold because he is in debt and he put everything into this house, and also there's a recession going on in their economy, and because of that, he does what they ask. They bathe there, practically acting like it's their house already. He doesn't have a name, so let's just call the rat the developer. The developer starts raging, falls down, and then we get this out-of-pocket dance performance by the fur beetles and larvae. Then he puts his foot down and tries to kick them out, calling the police. And instantly, when he opened the door, the police were there, but for a different reason. Plot twist, the person on the phone that they call darling or sweetheart isn't actually their lover, but his dentist, where he's being overly familiar with, calling him multiple times a day, calling him darling or even sweetheart. Ugh, such an ick. He was warned that if he does it again, he will be taken to court. Then we see a bunch of people that are the odd couple's relatives. The developer goes in, tries to open the insecticides of sort, and then sprays it on himself. He goes to the hospital and the couple takes him home, which he surprisingly goes along with, and then everybody claps for him in a creepy synced tempo. Then we jump cut to every rat just eating everything in the house, acting like the pests that the developer failed to kill, and then joins them as he scours out of the oven like an actual rat and goes down a hole through it. The end. Very confusing, I know. Very unsettling? Hell yes! It took me a moment after the dance number to realize that the weird couple was shaped like larvae and furby, and even made me think back about this conversation where they asked some oddly specific questions.
Is that a crepe weave fabric on the couches?
I have the brochure in my office, I can check.
What building insulation have you used in the house? Natural fibrous materials?
It's a mixture of wool, paper and cotton, actually.
Oh, nice.
Hearing him glad to know that the insulation was made out of wood, paper, and cotton just surprised me on my second watch with this foreshadowing, because wool and cotton are the things fur beetles commonly eat. Then we finally move on to the third segment, Listen Again and Seek the Sun. Here we get an anthropomorphic cat this time. Meet Rosa, the landlady, Elias, who pays with fish, and Jen, who pays with precious stones, much to Rosa's dismay, since she wants to have paying tenants to get their house fixed, which I don't know where the money's gonna go or where she's gonna buy it, since it's absolutely flooded. Jen brings in her spiritual partner she met 8 years ago named Cosmos. Cosmos says he'll offer his services and skill, which is to Rosa's delight, but ends up doing more damage than good when the floorboard she asked to fix was removed to make a boat for Elias, and Rosa didn't like that one bit. Just remember that throughout this story, Rosa is always stressed and mad, except for when they're partying at night and she's talking to Jen. It's fairly obvious that she's always mad at him. Elias leaves, leaving Rosa with 2 gifts, fish and portraits of them, where we find out that Rosa didn't even know that Elias draws. Rosa and Jen have a talk, their final meal together, before Jen also leaves since the flood is increasing and the water will soon enter the house. Rosa has this fixation that she can fix the house, just obsessed with the potential of this house, and even said in their earlier conversations that this house deserves it, which is a weird thing to say to a house and got me thinking about what she meant by it, or if she really meant the house or something else. Rosa states in her last meal together that she wanted to make fond memories, but she was always fighting the house. Jen does her misty mystical thing, telling Rosa not to be scared scared, and then you see Rosa's memories of having fun with Elias and Jen, and then her crying alone, and then she falls, the water already at her ankles, or the level of ankles people have. I don't know if she's a cat. Also, look at the animation on the water. For a stop motion film, I don't know how they pulled it off, but I'm very much impressed. She sees Jen and Cosmos leaving, telling her to come with them, and Rosa saying she can't because they're too far, showing that she's actually willing to leave. But now it's too late. The end. Just kidding. Surprisingly, this segment ends on a happy note when Rosa pulls a lever Cosmos made for her, and the house becomes a giant boat. I don't know how he managed to do that, but now Rosa can move on and explore the world without a plan of sorts and be together with her friends in the end. Now, finally we can talk about the house as a whole. The story, dialogue, animation, and music all come together beautifully. But before we talk about that, I'd like to thank this video sponsor, XPPEN. Want to win yourself a fancy display tablet like this and see how it works? Watch till the end of the video to find out more. There are 3 stories, and the only thing in common among the 3, which is apparent at first watch, is the house they live in. Does it have any significance? Does the house play a large part in the plot? Suffice it to say, I have a lot of questions. At first, I thought the house was haunted. With how segment 1 ended and how distraught and miserable the developer was in segment 2, I thought that whoever lived in this house would only be miserable and unfortunate, but that wasn't the case for segment 3. So that scratches out the haunted house idea. But then the ending song starts to play. It's titled The House Is. It was written by Jarvis Cocker and Gustavo Santaolalia. This song is very interesting by the end of the film because when the credits roll, I was racking my brain on what the house is, and the lyrics go by, I ripped out the kitchen, I repainted the walls, but nothing made any difference at all. This house, I don't know what it is. You can instantly connect it in every story, how they wanted to change the house and rebuild it. Schoenbeek kept changing it, the developer was refurbishing it, and Rosa wanted to rebuild it. But in the end, we still don't know what the house is other than wanting to change it to their own views of what the house actually is. Then it says, a home is a place love and life can mix. A house is nothing but a collection of bricks. This flashes me back to when Mabel calls their old house our home instead of our old house. All of them wanted a home, not a house. Mabel wasn't enamored by the fancy, wealthy-looking materials in the house, and neither did Isabel cause she's a weird baby that drops to a tall height and rolls down the stairs, turning out completely fine and unscathed. The developer seemed to long for the comfort of familiarity you can get from a home with family or loved ones, hence him being delusionally attached to his sweetheart, I mean dentist. Then we have Rosa, who wanted to rebuild the house so she can have a place to create fond memories, not realizing she already made good memories, but was too fixated on getting money to rebuild a house nobody was going to rent out. The song kept saying a house is just a collection of bricks, and I laughed so hard when I sort of realized what they were trying to say. The house I was trying to analyze and figure out so hard, taking hours to think about what the house could do to people living in it, what dangers it has, when it's just a collection of bricks. My theory is that we're not supposed to think that the house is some magical entity or a haunted, scary mansion. I'd like to think that the house is a reflection of the people living in it. I realized this when I saw the wallpaper in segment 1. There were eyes. It makes you feel like you're always watched, which can be true to the family situation. Being watched by von Schoenbeek in mysterious ways, being watched by the creepy silent workers, and especially at the start where all the eyes of the relatives are on the family, judging them. From the children they birth to the decoration in the house, the space. The immense pressure Raymond feels with all those judgmental eyes glaring at him makes him feel inferior, and it got to Raymond, hence his want to have something more, something that'll not make him look like a failure in the eyes of the relatives. I've looked around for interviews of the directors or writers and any interpretation from them, and I've found nothing, which makes this film a lot more interesting for me since anybody can think up their own interpretations of the house, the outcome, or why they became furniture. My theory is that it represents their obsession with looking fancy and feeling wealthy, the kind of bougie lifestyle their relatives expect them to have. They hated feeling inferior and just adored the large house with wealthy-looking furniture, going as far as to laugh at their old home where they made all their memories and the home Mabel loves. I think being turned to furniture just embodied what they were yearning for, look fancier, and the fatal flaw they had was forgetting what a home really is. Not just a house, but a place to make memories and be with your loved ones. And as soon as Raymond and Penny pay less and less attention to their children, they made no good memories in that house, or even none at all, since they were too preoccupied with the materials the house provided. They even continued eating dinner without looking or wondering where their children went, somehow forgetting them in the midst of the grand feast they were provided with daily. Also, I feel like they started not being themselves when they signed the contract because from what I got while watching, which I'm sure you also noticed, is that they went into this offer without thinking of the children. They, most specifically Raymond, wanted this to happen not for their family to have a better life or for his children to live in better conditions, but because he didn't want to look pathetic as he sees himself through the words and beratings of his relatives. In the second segment, in my eyes, the house definitely represents the developer. At first introduction to him, he seems to be put together and really reliable, especially since I hadn't noticed he was in debt until the bank kept calling him repeatedly. He seemed like a normal, hardworking, ordinary Joe with his life together. But as soon as we found out there were a lot of messed up things happening we weren't aware of, and it was already shown in his introduction when he was talking to his dentist, which at that point we all thought he was talking to his lover. Just like the house that looks incredibly fancy and beautiful, but inside there's something unsettling that's festering. And by the end, when the house looks as infested as it is on the outside of it, so did the developer, looking less than human. One more thing I'd like to point out where I feel like I won't be able to bring it up later is the fact that the developer did strike me as someone who wanted love or something intimate, hence why the longing sort of seeps into his life where it shouldn't be, like treating his dentist like they're close friends or lovers with the way he says darling and sweetheart. But I thought of this when he was trying to kill the pest. He sounded very suspicious, so to speak. Like, it could have sounded like something else, if you know what I mean. I can't say it bluntly because YouTube might give me that yellow circle, and it may just be my mind thinking too much into it, but the way he tries to kill pests was very weird to me and made me very uncomfortable. I watched it with subtitles, so I read what he said even with his distant mumblings. You can belittle my words on this part because I feel like it's such a stretch, but I just had to mention it because it really stood out to me in a sense that it wasn't what I was watching at all, or there's something more to it. Or not. For the final segment, the takeaway I got for Rosa is to learn to move on from something she can't stop from happening. It may symbolize a big change in Rosa's life, that she can't accept perhaps a trauma of hers, seeing as she can't talk about it with Jen in their first conversation, and not replying when the flood is even brought up in the conversation at all. I think that's what the flood is representing in my eyes. Rosa's motivation was to make memories in the house, not to make a living or build a grand business. Her goal was to make the house better so that she can make good memories for herself. Hence, she started falling apart when Elias left and completely gave up on staying when Jen left with Cosmos. The house needed an outside force to fix it, much like how Rosa had Cosmos to help her realize she needed to move on and not be stuck in the house. Well, I mean, she brought the house with her by the end, so I actually wanted to discuss that too. If Rosa's arc was to learn to move on and let go of the house, why was the ending presented as if she learned to move on but still carried the house with her? Did she truly move on if she's still carrying the thing that made her fixated on money and made her blind to the actual problem, which was the flood? And was it really a happy ending? Because with the music, especially with the close-up of Rosa, it sounded more bittersweet than happy. Maybe it is supposed to be a bittersweet moment where Rosa learned to move on and stop being fixated on a goal she knows she won't be able to achieve, not with the conditions of the world and the flood, but also because she hasn't given up on the house. But at least it was the first step. She acknowledges the flood, and at the very least now, she isn't restricted by the fear of the unknown. And I guess for me, that's my interpretation, because moving on isn't really one big whole event that you achieve everything instantly and then you just adjust from then on. It's a step-by-step thing, adjusting again and again after each step, and I guess this is Rosa's first step. I think one of the things that tie these three stories together is their want for money. The first one is Raymond wanting more because of the external pressures his relatives are weighing down on him. The second is the developer needing the money to pay off his debts and desperately wagering everything he had for this house, especially when there was a recession going on. And Rosa, who wanted money to rebuild the house, ignoring the flood entirely and just stuck on the idea that money will solve everything. My interpretation of this film is that even if there are different situations or different people in different time periods with vastly different motivations and goals, they always have this problem lingering. Money. Raymond's main motive for the whole first segment was to impress his relatives and feel and look accomplished, but he had to look rich. He needed money to achieve that. The developer mainly needs money for his debts, but just like the house, his problems lie deeper than what goes on the surface. His problem is the lack of intimacy and the careless way he goes about things. With his first initial solution to the fur beetles is by putting glue over the hole and not killing them, which gave them the chance to repopulate, to how he obviously waits for things to be a bigger problem before dealing with it. He mainly struggles to get a buyer to pay his debts, needing money in the process, but at the same time thinking that the house being sold will instantly instantly solve his problems when it's a more mental and emotional than physical needs, if anything. Then we have Rosa, who I've already discussed but will briefly mention again. Her problem was her inability to accept the reality of the flood and finally learn to move on in life even without a plan. But her problem is her want for money to fix the house, thinking that if her tenants pay money, it will help her situation with the house. She needed the money to achieve her many plans for the house. I mean, Elias gives something a lot more valuable to them: fish. She just needs to eat in this rundown state of the world, but she'd rather take money and buy materials from goodness knows where. But in the end, the house is so interesting, and I just love discussing it and thinking about the little details I noticed and what different interpretations people have about it. It truly is a piece of art where the creator lets you decide your own views and interpretations, and the fun of it is, we can talk about it and share our thoughts with much more interesting discussions because our point of view in life can vastly change how we see the situations in the film. In the end, do I recommend this movie? Absolutely. I want you guys to watch it for yourselves. I'm sure this is not for everyone, but it is really interesting. And the fun part about it isn't just the movie, but right after, when you start thinking about it and finding more and more things to notice. It's just a great film. So please go watch it. It's out on Netflix if you'd like to know where to find it. And if you want to make your own piece of art, you can use the XPPEN 15.6 Pro. We're going to the sponsors now. XPPEN just brought me their 15.6 Pro display tablet, and for those who don't know, it's a tablet with a screen that you can connect to your computer and make all kinds of art like digital art or 3D sculpting. They give you this big boy along with a stand and a non-chargeable pen with this fancy case that has the nibs, a glove for drawing, a cloth for cleaning, and different types of plugs in case you don't have one or the other. It also has another cord for powering up the tablet in case the power on your laptop or desktop isn't enough. They think of everything. They also have 8 short keys and a little wheel you can spin around to zoom in and out, which is hella convenient for me because what I do is I click the plus-minus bar at the top right. It's a hassle, but it's honest work. I mean, look at how smooth this thing is. It's been a while since I've had a display tablet, probably 4 or 5 years ago, but I'm sort of addicted to it now since it makes it way easier for me to draw details even when animating. If you're curious about the strokes and pressure sensitivity when coloring or drawing, and the clips in this video ain't enough, don't worry, I'll link a live stream I did wherein I used the tablet for the first time when drawing and sketching. That'll help you decide for yourself if this is the tablet you want. It probably is, because it's my new favorite tablet. XPPEN and I are holding a contest. The link for the details will be provided in the description. The winner gets a 15.6 Pro display tablet of their own. So if you'd like one of these, go ahead and join. The deadline is February 1st, 2023. Thanks so much XPPEN for sponsoring this video. Yo! Happy New Year, patrons! Thanks so much for helping support the channel. You guys are keeping this channel alive and I appreciate it a lot. Calling out my patrons on the Butternut tier: Pyranet, Jacob K, Mindhack, Christian V, Cross, and to F Ignite in the Dill Pickles tier. So yeah, next movie I'm gonna review is gonna be... It's gonna be about My Little Pony Equestria Girls? Did I say it that right? As requested by Mindhacked. I don't know anything about My Little Pony, okay? Bronies are gonna keep their eyes on me, for sure. Oh my gosh.